Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for giving up your time this evening, and a big welcome from me and from Eileen. Eileen is on voice only, but she is there and she is live. Do you want to say hello, Eileen?
I do want to say hello, and I'm not on screen because my laptop doesn't let me go on screen. It's so ancient.
Well, everybody, before we start, we just want to set a context here to say thank you, and thank you for everything you've done. It would be terribly hypocritical if we're talking about the emotional and physical well-being of our children and young people, and we do not talk about yours as well. And it is so easy to forget the job teachers are doing. And if Eileen and I were stood live in an audience with you now, my mum would say that when you look into people's eyes, you see the window of their soul. And if we asked you how you all are, you would say we're fine or we're okay, because you never moan. We know you're probably exhausted, extremely tired, frustrated, and confused by some of the messages that are out there. But we just want you to know we are here for you, and we do hope if the vaccine is live in December, teachers are also one of the first people to be offered the opportunity to have that, because we know how well you're doing and how you need to keep going when many of your colleagues are already faced with self-isolation and COVID. So welcome, and hopefully...
And a welcome from me, and I endorse everything that Sue has said.
Thank you. We've got lots of questions. We've got 10 coming that have come in. If you've got any more, please put them into the questions box and we'll answer them either as we go or at the end with the others. So over to you, Eileen, for the outcomes of the webinar.
Next slide, please, Simon. Okay, then, well, the outcomes, and hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll be very much aware of the updated guidance. Sue will outline this in the next slide. You'll understand the changes to the website reporting template, quite minimal changes, but they are slightly different. We are going to share the top tips, which were put together by Active Partnerships, AFBI and the YST. We'll share, or Sue very much will share, a vision for future legacy. That is all about sustainability and how important sustainability is, and recognise the need to reactivate PESPA at the heart of the school. This was really beginning to happen before the lockdown, and it's so important we reactivate that. And then, of course, it's always got to come up, hasn't it? We've got to be aware of the impact of COVID-19. And I know there's guidance on our website based on the DFE guidance. And at the end, or even during, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Anything you want to add, Sue?
No, thank you. I'll have the next slide, please, Simon. Okay, you're probably aware of this as the guidance is out there and it is on gov.uk, but you'll know government were happy to let you carry over any underspend, and we know some of you haven't got any underspend, some have got a little bit and some have quite a lot. The only proviso now is that you have to spend and evidence that by March 2021, which is the end of that particular financial year. Whereas the rest of the template has to be evidenced by July. When AFBI, YST and Active Partnerships had a look at this, all of us were united in saying we have to keep the workload down for teachers for obvious reasons. And DFE supported that. So when Eileen goes through the template with you, you'll find minor tweaks on there, but nevertheless one or two significant ones, because it's important you get your spend in both places. Now, hopefully you will have had plenty of time to think about this. You don't have to have spent that underspend yet, as long as you evidence it at the right time. Steve has also asked us to mention that, in case you've forgotten, and I'm sure you haven't, there isn't anywhere within the Education Inspection Framework, new guidance from 2019, about reporting on what you've done with your primary PE and sport funding. However, it may well come up within the curriculum element, within personal development and behaviour, and if you have a PE deep dive. Certainly, when you tell your story about how you in physical education are implementing your school's vision for intent, implementation and impact, it's really important that you do articulate that this spend was important and it's allowed you to do X, Y and Z. And then obviously you've still got to work to the same 5 key indicators. They were not changed at all because they felt they were generic enough and flexible enough for you to all work for. As usual, you can spend on one key indicator or all 5. It doesn't matter, mix and match. It's all based on your self-review. Obviously, as we've known for some time, that the sustainability element is what your head teacher has signed up to in that grant. It is right at the top of the 5 key indicators. How can we make this sustainable for future children and young people? We know the panic and worry when we thought we'd lost funding for this next academic year. We have it. How long we have it for, you are all witnessing the amount of money that's having to be invested in order to make sure we're COVID safe and there's vaccines and so on. So we don't know if we'll have any money. That's the absolute honest truth. We hope so. The task force is working very hard to look at investment in future going forward for PESPA. But we have to plan for sustainability, because if this is the last year, what difference has that money made over 7 years? Now, we see fantastic evidence of the difference it's made, and we also see other areas where they could have done better. So it's really important that we plan for sustainability. Thank you, Simon. Eileen, have you anything to add to that?
No, nothing to add, Sue.
Okay,
Next
Eileen's
slide.
going to take you through now onto the template.
Yeah, next slide, please, Simon. I'm sure that some of you will already have seen this. This is the front cover of the template, different photograph, very similar to the one that you've been working on last year, but a very important change is it's been revised in October 2020. And you'll notice if you're still working with the old one, you'll have the 2019 date on. But if you have started working and inputting on the old one, we have tried to keep the changes to a minimum. You'll see the three partners at the bottom, AFPI, the Youth Sport Trust, and we've worked together very closely on it with the DFE, and we have tried to keep it as the changes as minimal as possible. Just before we go on to the next slide, Sue's already referred to Ofsted, and they have no role in determining how the premium is being spent. But one focus that they will have when they're inspected is whether leaders and those responsible for governors all understand their respective roles and perform these in a way that enhances the effectiveness of the school. So it's very important that senior leadership teams and governors are kept well informed about your premium spending. Next slide, please, Simon. This is a reflection, really. It's a reflection. I know you'll have reported on this, but it's important that before you start on 2020-21, that you have a little bit of a review and a reflect on what you did last year. Considering the 5 key indicators, or the indicators that you focused on, ones that you felt went really, really well, the key achievements up until July 2020. And we know that because of the unprecedented times we live in, that some of those key achievements might not have been what you really wanted to achieve. But this is where you can actually reflect, and you can also identify what you really need to focus on or want to focus on this next academic year. Always remembering that the important people at the end of this are the young people and the impact it has on them. You'll notice there's a slight difference at the bottom of the page where it says, did you carry forward an underspend? And I know Sue's already referred to this, from 2019-20 into this year, and some schools have carried through quite a substantial amount. If you answer yes to that question, it's then absolutely crucial that you then fill in the next section in the template. Simon, would you please put that next slide up for me, please? And as Sue has quite already said, this is where if you've got whatever £1,000, £10,000 underspend, and you've carried it forward, it's very important that this is used by the 31st of March 2021, and that you actually say how it's used. So you'll need to write in the total that you've carried forward, and then what key indicators you're going to focus on. And then it's the same, those 3 I's again. We've tried very much to keep in tune with the Ofsted framework, inspection framework, so that it's intent, what you're intending to do with it, how are you going to implement this, how much it's going to cost out of the carryover funding, and really, really important, that 4th column, the evidence of impact. And you can write down what impact you feel it's had, but you then need to say how you know it's had that impact. I know that we've talked a lot about schools re-engaging or young people re-engaging with school over this next term particularly, and perhaps you want to focus some of that spending on getting young people to re-engage with PE, school sport and physical activity. Sue's already mentioned emotional well-being, children feeling good about themselves again, and we know that good PE, school sport and physical activity, we know that when it's done well and children actively engage with it, that they feel good about themselves. And then that all-important last column about sustainability. We really have got to focus on sustainability. And also it's quite important when you're writing this particular section, you think about how it's linking in to what you're going to spend this year's allocation on. It's not a separate silo, it's separate funding, but it's not a separate silo. So try to make sure you link it into what you're spending this next year's funding on, or this next academic year's funding. Important date to remember though is March 2021, 31st of March. It must be spent by then, and you must have recorded how you spent it in the usual way with the 3 I's, and then how you're going to make it sustainable. Okay, anything you want to add, Sue?
No, not at all.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next slide then. Right, swimming. This has caused so much stress because swimming is such an important skill, and we've really felt that prior to March that we were beginning to get really on top of swimming, and young people, you know, some of the premium spend was being spent on top-up swimming for those children that hadn't achieved the end of key stage attainment target. And then of course it fell down like a, you know, it just fell down, didn't it? And we do know that importantly, a lot of young people have missed out quite comprehensively on their swimming. You can only complete this section to the very best of your ability. For example, we know a lot of people, and certainly not at the moment unless they have their own pools, we know children are not swimming. And as we're back in lockdown and pools and leisure centres are closed, well, obviously they're definitely not swimming at the moment. But you might work on some of the other things, practicing safe self-rescue on dry land, other techniques of safe self-rescue on dry land. I know I'm going to pass over to Sue in a moment because AFBI and the Royal Lifesaving Society and Swim England have been working together on how we can support the profession. I think it's going to be done through the Teaching Schools Alliance, but I'm going to pass that over to Sue because she's much better informed than I on that one. Sue?
Yes, the Department for Education funded 10 Teaching Schools Alliances with some additional funding around swimming, and we've been working hard to try and look at how we can support schools where they can't access physically a swimming pool at the moment. So there will be some webinars run for these Teaching Schools Alliances. So if you're one of the 10, they will be coming out to you, and then we think they're going to make them available to everybody, but there could be a cost. I don't know about that, but but that is something to keep your eye on with Swim England. As I say, we're supporting on content, but Swim England and DFE will be running that, and we'll get some news out to you as soon as we know more. There is, Eileen, a question about, can we clarify what the key stage 2 swimming targets are for children in special schools? And is there an expectation that they have to work to the same target? Do you want to respond to that, or shall I?
We can only do what we can do, and if there's no pool to go to because it's shut or for transport reasons, there's so many obstacles, hurdles we'll call them, to actually accessing swimming again. But everybody is working towards that aim, and one of the I know one of the sessions that Swim England and AFPI and the Royal Lifesaving Society are talking about is sort of how to access, once pools are open again, how to access them safely, ways of doing this. It's all work in progress, and at the moment it is work in progress because we can't say when it will happen again.
And there is an expectation that safe self-rescue can be done on dry land, although I'll come on to it later. We don't want to end up with a COVID curriculum where that's always taught on dry land, but we're trying to find positive solutions to help. With regards to key stage 2 for children with special educational needs, with swimming, it is exactly the same as the attainment target for physical education. You know, so it's that whole adaptation that they will be working towards. There isn't an expectation that your 25 metres you need to put in there, that if your children have those particular needs, that will make it impossible for them to achieve that because of whatever their special needs are, then you'll need to put that in. However, we do have children in special needs who are leading the country in terms of attainment in swimming. So again, it's all contextualised, and when you're reporting, you have to put that into your report so people can understand why your figures are very high or the same or lower. So I think, was that from Jeanette, that question? I'm not sure, but I can't see it because I haven't put my glasses on. But yes, so your swimming attainment is reported exactly the same as you'd report any other physical education attainment, whether or not you're in a special school or maintained school. Okay, I hope that helped.
Yeah, I hope so. I think as well, once swimming does start again, more schools will use some of the premium funding for top-up swimming, not for curriculum swimming, but for top-up swimming, particularly for those children that have missed out this last 6 months or so. But we can only do what we can do at the moment, and it's, you know, who knows, but hopefully we'll get back into some sort of normality after Christmas. Next slide, please, Simon, unless you've got anything else to add, Sue. Okay, well, this was a very quick one because this is just an example of how this particular or these particular section has not changed. Sue's already alluded to the 5 key indicators. They are exactly the same, with that important header which says additional and sustainable improvements to the quality of PE and sport that you offer. And I know Sue's going to talk about that further down the presentation, but it's exactly the same with the key indicators. One that we've talked about quite a lot and is key indicator number 3, which is about increased confidence, knowledge and skills of all staff. And that is one way of really ensuring sustainability or helping to ensure sustainability. And this may well be quite a good time to use some of the premium spending to do that. It's exactly this template is exactly like the old one. It's the 3 I's again in what you're intending to do, how you're going to implement it, and make sure that the actions to implement it link into your intentions, because it should flow naturally through, how much it's going to cost, and then that all important evidence of impact. And it's really what do pupils know can do now that they couldn't do before. What's changed, and then you actually supply the evidence in that column, and then how you're going to sustain it when the funding's gone, or if the funding goes, but who knows. But the important factor is that if you've started to fill these sections in on the old template or last year's template, it's not a problem, because it's exactly the same. You can cut and paste onto this one. The important thing here, and I think this is in the recommendations in the notes at the beginning, is don't leave it until the 29th of July to start filling it in. Use it as a working document. Fill it in as you go along. Swap and change. Use it as your own development tool. Because if you leave it and leave it and leave it, it's crisis in July when you're trying to fill it in. So start now and add to it. Take bits out, put other bits in. Try to make sure that you work on it over the course of the academic year. So don't leave it till the last minute. But it has to be completed and submitted on your website by the 31st of July. That's a legal requirement. So, but as I say, don't leave it till then. Anything to add, Sue?
Yes, we've had a couple of questions. One of them was, how can we effectively measure impact relating to attainment? We've got a national curriculum slide further on, so Eileen will answer that question there. And then I do apologise, we haven't got all the names on here, but I think it was Alan who asked, how can we apply pressure on government to ring-fence the premium? Just to let you know, Alan, the premium has been ring-fenced for PE and sport, and obviously latterly for physical activity as well. Since 2013, it is ring-fenced. It shouldn't be spent on any other area of the curriculum whatsoever. And if you think that's happening, then that is something you have to challenge, and we're more than happy, as I'm sure the other organisations are, to challenge that. It is solely ring-fenced for PE, sport and physical activity. And then we've also got a question, and I do apologise, I can't see your name on this, I'm not being rude, but it says, can we seek your recommendation that it is best practice to leave online previous year's PES annual reports so as to provide clear transparency of attention to sustainability in carrying over? There is no way to test the integrity of this year's reporting. That's a really good question. We would always say somewhere you need to have all that information, and particularly if you're having an inspection, because you can articulate, demonstrate and show that where you've spent it, and then they can cross-check that with the bursar or head teacher to make sure you've got a consistent approach to this. And somewhere on your website or in your files or hard copy, you will have all of your reports, hopefully in templates, so you can show there's been progress and you're not spending the money on the same thing every year. So yes, we would certainly support, and I'm sure, you know, Kate was here, she would say the same at YST. It's very good to keep a record of how you spent your money. You know that, because you can be called on at any time to actually verify how you have spent it. So yeah, thank you for that, Eileen. Could we have
I think that's a good point, Sue, because just looking at our Quality Mark Award, when we look on the school's website, we often look at the previous year's spend, or even the year before that, because it does demonstrate progression and moving forward, rather than, as you say, spending it on the same thing every year.
Yeah. Sorry, just a quick one. Someone said, can we have some examples of how to pay for physical activity to enhance the 30 minutes indicator? Yeah, I mean, we can give you some really good examples where we see it preschool, sort of training for support assistants and additional outside providers to come in and do some physical activity before school and at lunchtime. That's not a problem as well, as long as you benchmark and you can show progress. Also upskilling of your teachers, which is sustainable. Also active travel and things that children can do at home. So if there is a resource out there that you feel is appropriate, that will help them be active, both in and outside of school, that would be brilliant. That is effective use of the spend. You've got quite a lot of flexibility on that. As long as you can demonstrate impact and sustainability, I think you can choose anything you want that would be best fit for your school. Is that fair, Eileen? Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, well, even now, because the weather is still pretty reasonable, so many schools are doing outdoor curriculums at the moment. Yeah. You know, and there's so much activity outside in right across the curriculum, and so I think that's a really good point. It's about getting children active and keeping them active.
There is one about an apprentice. You just have to be careful of that, of double funding. You can't pay apprentice salaries. If you're wanting to appoint someone to work specifically to have active play times, That's great. There's some fantastic resources out there. But if you're going to employ someone, the biggest question you've got to ask is, how is that sustainable if there's no more money? Is it about upskilling staff that have already employed, be they dinner supervisors, be they technicians, or we've just filmed in a primary school that's got a PE faculty, which is quite interesting, and are doing a great job. And they also have volunteers in as well as paid staff, but they're trying to find a solution to make sure it's sustainable. Okay, I'm just going to move us on because we just want to show you the top tips in case you haven't seen those as yet. If we could just pull those up. I'm not going to talk in detail about those because we are just getting a bit behind it in time at the moment. Can we have the next slide, Simon, please? Thank you. So this was the brainchild of Dan Wilson, who is in Yorkshire Sport, an active partnership, and he worked with AFPI to see what we thought about this. We thought it was a great idea because it does keep colleagues' ideas, and then together with YST and children and young people leads across the rest of the active partnerships, we all sort of put our heads up to have a look at that. So effective use of the spend at the moment. Now, bearing in mind we have the whole sort of COVID umbrella, as well as that, we've also got to look forward. How are you going to make this sustainable for those children who are having to self-isolate? If we go back into a lockdown and children are at home, how are you going to use the money for sustainability? Also, right from the word go, whole school improvement was key. How are we improving children's behaviour? How are we improving attendance? How are we improving cognitive achievement? But also now, the emotional well-being has come right to the forefront. We know children and young people were suffering way before COVID, but actually that's a big issue now. So in order to have an impact on whole school improvement, what can we use through PE, sport and physical activity to improve physical health and well-being, attendance, attainment? Then obviously with COVID as well, there's been a lot of teachers saying outdoors is best. You're absolutely right. And as Eileen said, in certain parts of the country, the weather's quite good still. And in the summer, we saw some great creativity from head teachers and colleagues moving classrooms outside, using sort of covers just to do, so they could do dance outside, so they could do gymnastics on the grass. It was quite incredible, some of the ideas people came up with. Now, can we do outdoor learning? Can we move our outdoor and adventurous completely out in the playground? That's socially distanced and appropriate. Can we do a lot through the nature trails? Can we use that in the early years and key stage 1 and combine that? It's not just about being physically active, it's also about the learning environment and how that transfers to other curriculum areas, because you're then having an impact on that through outdoor learning. Active travel, as you know, is really important. A lot of parents we know have turned to go use their cars again, which is a great shame when people were becoming so active and walking to school, but we know that's difficult for all the health reasons. But can we encourage young people, so if they come to school in a car in the morning, can they actually manage to go home walking with parents? I know that's an issue, but what sort of active travel can we take on board? It is difficult with the social distancing, we know that, but perhaps that is one we can plan for as COVID restrictions lift. This one is key, and if Jo Harris was on this line, she was on the task force yesterday, she called it a rant, but it was actually a very well articulated presentation that PE is the only entitlement for every child to be educated through the physical. And that is key, absolutely key, if we are to impact on physical, emotional, social, cognitive elements of a child's life. It's really, really important that the high quality PE is there. Our staff need to be upskilled if appropriate. That is a sustainable legacy. The teachers are the bedrock of the educational system, and without them, we don't have anything. And I remember Sue Campbell saying years and years ago, when I shared a platform, that if we only rely on external support, then actually if the money stops, we have a problem. And we see some fantastic work by outside providers where they have moved to upskilling teachers. Brilliant job, because upskilling of that technical knowledge has been great. We don't have coaching for teachers anymore, which is a great shame. So using funding to upskill your staff, to put them on a level 5, 6, so they've got a PE subject specialist degree. All of the learning opportunities are online at the moment. So it's really important that we use this money wisely. And then, of course, there's innovation. They say teachers of physical education are some of the most innovative and creative in the profession. And my goodness, have we seen that clearly evidenced during COVID with some of the ideas that you've come up with. And we'll talk about it a bit later. Is it now time to look at different elements rather than the traditional offer of a PE in school, a PE curriculum? Is it different now? What can we offer? What have they really enjoyed? Are we really using pupils' voice to enable and inform us to be innovative? And then, of course, swimming. Swimming is a key. It's a life skill. We are challenged by COVID, and there's nothing we can do about that at the moment other than move some of the staff to indoors to do the safe self-rescue. Can we talk about that? Can we embed it as part of our PSHE? Is it important? Can you jump in and save someone? Do you know how to save someone? Do you know what the key elements are? Do you know why swimming is important? So it's all those sorts of elements there. Okay, Simon, could I have the next one, please? Now, this is really important to us because, you know, we know during this start of COVID, we had schools closed. There was those pupils who were in school because they were frontline workers, and those schools who didn't close and haven't closed at all. And then we had the 6-week holiday. So what we've got is a bit of a graphic equaliser in terms of children's attendance at school. There are an awful lot self-isolating for obvious and right reasons. So we decided to look at reactivating learning through PE. And what is really important is there is a why and a how, and then the second part of this poster is about the what. And we don't know whether schools have been able to benchmark, but if you look at the triangle at the pink elements, it's about rejuvenation and helping children get back into a formalised educational setting. We know the phenomenal pressure schools are under, both primary and secondary, to actually catch up. But all the research has shown way before COVID that if children are not physically and socially and emotionally well, they will not retain knowledge. There's a whole sort of regression. And we see even in the 6 weeks holidays, when they may well be happy and excited to be at home, there is always that dip and you need to reactivate the learning. But on top of that, we now have COVID. So in terms of that sort of pink session there, if we start with the physical well-being, it actually talks about, in the pink bit, how the children feel. Has there been a loss of motor skills? You know, have they actually become less fit? Well, we know from Sport England's data, absolutely. And then if you look across at the emotional well-being, the examples are in there about, have children got lower self-esteem? Are they looking at mood swings? Now, we put out a short survey to parents and we asked 3 simple questions. Have your children become more restless, and has their behaviour deteriorated? The second question was, do you have to ask them more than you normally would to do something? And has their sleep pattern deteriorated? We have never had 100% response where everybody said the same thing, yes, yes, yes. So it is really important that we recognise that children have gone through some quite challenging emotional well-being issues. And then if we look down at the sort of social well-being, are they feeling less confident? Because if they're less confident, they won't learn. And, you know, are they not having to sort of re-engage with you? Do they need your reassurance more than they normally would? You know your children better than ever. And if we then look at the cognitive, are they finding it hard? Are you having to say things several times? Are they these children that would normally retain knowledge that you give them and are able to regurgitate that or articulate what it means in the context you're asking them? Are you having to actually replay parts of your lessons? Now, if that's the case, we've got some challenges. Can you translate that into a document that children could highlight themselves in their language, that actually I'm going to highlight this red because this is how I feel? Or actually, no, I don't feel like that, it's green, because that will give you a benchline there where you could perhaps invest in things that will support physical, emotional social and cognitive well-being, because that's absolutely key. If we could have the next slide, Simon. This then looks at how you put this in the context of the what. Now, remember, the physical activity that we do is only the vehicle for the learning we really want to get over. We don't have a sport curriculum, we have a physical education curriculum. One of only two, if you include drama, where they're actually educated through the physical, and it is absolutely vital that we look at that. So in terms of emotional well-being, then what can we ask these people, these children and young people to do to get more confident? And that's giving you the what, if you like. So we might do, under the social aspect, of more team building exercises, although socially distant, to get children to be part of a team, to have a feeling of belonging. Are we asking them to do particular activities that help memory? So such as traffic lights, such as, almost Simon said, things that will stimulate their mind. So these posters are on the website for you to download, but what they are good at is a self-review for the child. If you translate them into their language, can these go home and actually act as a script to talk to parents and carers? Because some of the parents and carers are telling us, yes, they know their child, but their child is actually going into a shell and not talking about how they feel. And this might be a stimulus to allow them to do that. It also gives you a benchmark to clearly articulate, this is where our children are now. We've invested in them and they are much more confident. Their memory is returned. They are much more happy to look and sit in a educational context, more formalised. They are more active. They're retaining. Their fitness has improved. So it's really important to help you use this as an aid memoir. Look on the website and it's all there for you to download. Okay, could I have the next
Can I just
slide?
come in there, Sue?
Sorry, Eileen. Yeah, I was just going to say, if you hadn't got anything to add, I'm sorry, smacked
No, I've just come in there because we talked about that underspend and how you're going to, or the carryover. When you're looking at your intent and how you're going to implement it, this is some of the triggers that you can actually use as aid memoir. And then when you're looking at the impact column, you should be perhaps looking at those 4 key areas.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the impact on the young people and the things that you're putting in place using some of the underspend in order to achieve those 4 very important areas.
Yeah, could I have the next slide, please, Simon? I'm going to whip through the next 2 because these are almost an aid memoir to help you really. That as you're looking to modify your curriculum, it needs to be bespoke. It is about you. It's needs driven. You know your children better than anyone. You know the constraints you're having to work under. We were talking to secondary colleagues yesterday as part of the task force, and they were saying it's going to be really hard for examinations because they are actually going to lose some of their indoor space. So, how is that affecting you? Are we having to use the school hall to space people out? Will you have enough indoor space when the weather becomes quite inclement? So this has to be about your curriculum for your schools, your resources, your children and young people, and of course your staff. People have asked the health and safety team, what activities can we teach? You can teach any activity you want. There's brilliant NGB advice out there, but it's about the recreational context. As I said, we don't have a sport curriculum. If you are throwing and catching, that is not about necessarily rounders or cricket. It is about the children throwing and catching to improve those skills into a reciprocal. So of course you can do that. If you happen to be looking at invasion games and you're looking at marking the space, the fact that resembles football and you use in a football, it doesn't mean to say that you're actually playing 11-side football. You're actually building up the competencies and all the other outcomes through an invasion game. So you can actually do any activity you can. The one restriction at the moment is, of course, swimming. But that's because you can't teach it, is because you can't actually access the swimming pool. So what we're saying as well, and I spoke at length with Ofsted, we've had lots of discussions with them, and we do not want a COVID curriculum, because if and when this horrendous virus subsides or goes away completely, then we are not going to be able to give a broad and balanced curriculum because we'll have a shrunken COVID curriculum. So what we need to do is plan for the ideal and then adapt it to fit the COVID restrictions. So when they are lifted, we can then expand that broad and balanced curriculum. What is key here is to keep the senior leadership team informed and on board, because if they know all of the challenges you've got, then they can actually help you and support you. And then, of course, the whole PE, sport and physical activity is a jigsaw. If you take away a piece of the jigsaw, you lose that full picture. So we would ask you to please try and keep all three on board. And could I have the next slide, please, Simon? Now, we're calling it the temporary COVID because we're really positive, and we're hoping that eventually we will have some kind of normality. And what we want to do is ensure that you have a legacy to leave post-COVID. Now, we've talked about the re-engagement principles that can be used as part of the reactivation, but it's also getting those children and young people back into a more formalised learning pattern, socialising with one another. We've had members report to us that some of the children are having difficulty working with their peers again, also being contained in a bubble. And then we were saying yesterday again to some secondary colleagues, they're finding it really difficult to manage students when they're leaving school. And the same in primary, that, you know, sometimes the parents get together and yet you've kept them in this bubble all day. So there are re-engagement principles where we have to try and get the children and young people to understand when they leave school, there are also certain challenges they're going to have to contend with at the moment to keep them all safe and well. Keep that broad and balanced curriculum offer, adapted, and then embrace the 5 key indicators. We've also asked that these are passed on to secondary colleagues, and maybe, because someone asked, can we use it in other creative ways? Maybe you talk about transition here, because we know that children and young people are getting a great experience in primary school. And so that's important, and Eileen again will mention that later on. So manage your COVID, but manage it safely. You have to teach safely and you have to teach safety. And now this includes how the school policy is about hand hygiene, about social distancing, and obviously if your policy on risk assessment and cleaning of equipment as well. Okay, Simon, I'm going to pass over to Eileen now, if you've got anything to add, Eileen, and to talk about the national curriculum.
No, I'll add the bits when I get to my bit, if you like, Sue.
Okay, can we have the next slide, please?
I know we've used this slide on many occasions to try to emphasise that the national curriculum is not in one silo and the PE and sport premium is not in another silo. They work together. It's a bit like the three other areas: PE, school sport, physical activity. They interlink. One supports the other. And so it's really important that if you actually put them side by side, you could see the similarities. You know, develop a competence and excel in a broad range of physical activities, and then you look at the across and its engagement of pupils in regular physical activity, and a broader experience in a range of sports and activities offered to all pupils. So if you actually put them together, and then that all-important one, that third key indicator about increasing the confidence of staff, it's not just about increasing their confidence about the PE and sport premium funding, it's increasing their confidence so that they deliver the national curriculum confidently. And Sue talked about, you don't plan a COVID curriculum, because when COVID eventually is gone, and it will be gone eventually, we don't want that shrunken curriculum. And one thing that PE people have always been really good at is that differentiation. It's so you plan for the ideal, you continue to plan to develop competence and to excel in a broad range of physical activities, and then you actually adapt it so that it meets the safety requirements of COVID. So it's almost, and I said this to Sue earlier, it's almost like using STEP again, isn't it? You consider the space, you consider the tasks, you consider the equipment, and you consider the people, and you adapt it so that it actually is safe for the children to undertake. But there's absolutely no reason why they cannot do all those 4 aims in the national curriculum: develop competence, are physically active, engage in competitive sports, and lead healthy lifestyles. And they effectively track across to the key indicators in the programme of study. And Sue's already mentioned that all-important transition to secondary schools, working with your secondary schools so that they don't reteach everything, but they actually just revisit and consolidate what your young people have done in primary school, and then when they get to secondary school, it's just revisit it, review it, but don't start to reteach it again, because that's when we lose the interest of the young people. So that crucial transition bit is really important. Anything you want to add to that, Sue? So
sorry, I've committed the cardinal sin. I was on mute.
you can mute yourself.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you talk to your secondary colleagues, that you invest some of that money in transition.
Absolutely.
You know, it is absolutely key. And those 5 key indicators, when we were talking to secondary colleagues in Cornwall the other week, you know, they're there. Someone actually said to me, these are really good, you know. And also those of you as colleagues who are involved in the secondary teacher training programme, that Sport England, AFPIA and YST, as well as you know, Barry Horn's organisation in terms of disability, are all involved in this. It's really key that you talk to each other and see, you know, can they come and work with you on some of these things and look at the difference you could make. What, you know, can your spend, when you've spent, can it then look at the secondary spend and how it can be carried on and used into secondary schools to make sure children and young people have this fantastic seamless journey of PESPA. Yep. Okay. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay. The elephant in the room. The guidance that's been put out recently, it's been quite interesting because it was put out, you know, in a positive way to ensure that people had a clear picture, and obviously quite a lot of us were confused. AFPI's job is to interpret any guidance and translate from a legal health and safety to mitigate any type of case law or statute law having to be addressed, and to ensure the workforce is safe. We put, when it says, can we do extracurricular clubs, as no, unless they're within the proviso of wraparound care. And I think DfE would have liked us to say yes, if it's in the proviso of wraparound care. So we were saying the same thing, albeit differently. So you will have seen that the 4 organisations, AFPI, YST UK Active, and I can't remember the 4th, that's absolutely dreadful, but we all come together to actually say, right, we'll sign up to this, SRA it was, and we did. But please, we've put a caveat out following legal advice that you have to follow the provisos where possible, but we want every single child to have access to physical education, extracurricular activities and physical activity. And the profession have been really creative, from moving clubs to lunch times to actually putting them under the caveat of wraparound care. You know, the creativity and innovation has been brilliant. But the buck stops with the schools. The schools make the decision via their employer. So please make sure you and your employer are working from the same hymn sheet, and then you're absolutely fine. Can you operate fixtures? This was really clear. No, there is no inter-school fixtures at all. That's clear, and all the organisations, you know, SRA, UK Active, AFPI and YST would all say the same on that. Can you teach, what can you teach? As we've said, you can teach anything, providing you comply with your hand sanitisation, that you do your spacing, and obviously you've completed your risk assessment for PE. The local leisure centre, we would have thought the answer was a straight no, but lots of questions have come in where there's dual use. So a leisure centre is shut because it can't open to the public, because that was the guidance, everyone's shut down. But the schools who use them in the day were then faced with, what do we do if we don't have any staff in there? We had a test case yesterday where there had to be some liaison between the local authority, the local council and the school, because they were on the same site. So it's really important that you have discussions locally with the employers of both sets, be it council and be it local authority for you, to see whether or not you can access those facilities. Can you teach indoors? This is a really interesting one. I was on Radio Ulster the other day because 10 minutes into the school day, the principals, which are their head teachers here in Northern Ireland, were told they could only teach PE outdoor with 15 children, and they have a very different setup to us. So who is going to look after the other 15, and why can't there be indoors as well when the school hall and gyms were far bigger than the classroom? And we haven't had an answer to that yet. We would say, you know, yes, of course you can go indoors, as long as it's socially distant. And often the classroom is far smaller than the hall, or if you're lucky enough to have a designated space for PE indoors. So that's really important. And if it's a case of you can't teach PE because of inclement weather, it's really bad, it's snowing or sleeting or what have you, then of course we'd want to be indoors and we'd want them to be physically active. Eileen, is there anything you want to add to any of those points?
No, I think it's very clear. The advice is on the websites, on the AFPI website, it's on the YST website. It's very clear what you can, and obviously in-school fixtures are a no-no because children are coming out across children that they've not met during the day. So yeah, it's very clear as the advice that's on the website.
Thank you. And can we have the last but one slide, please, Simon? Okay. In terms of your reporting, it's absolutely vital that when you talk about impact, as Eileen said, that it's about the pupils and not necessarily that the teachers. You know, we see some fantastic things where a school has had the whole of the primary staff on a particular piece of professional learning, but the two words that, you know, you would be asked is, so what? So when you've got that in there, if you want to keep it in there, please add two words, as a result, or three words, as a result. The difference then it's made to the lives of children and young people. So it may be everybody is now completed a Swim England teachers course, and as a result there has been a 30% increase in the number of children who can swim 25 metres. So there's some qualitative and quantitative data in there, which is absolutely brilliant. Or you can just put children and young people are more socially competent now as a result of engaging in. Your professional judgment can be counted, but you do need some benchmark data. So the example we've given you with the reactivation, you know, if you look at that you felt 85% of your children had returned to school and were not confident, but as a result of doing X, Y, and Z and spending this money, you have now found 99% of the children have said they are far more confident. So the pupil voice, the teacher's professional judgment, quantitative data is all acceptable in there. That whole combination, it's nice to see it and a bit of an eclectic mix. Also, be clear and concise. Use bullet points about how you're going to make this sustainable. Somebody was really honest the other day and said, is it okay to say this will stop post-funding? If it's the truth, that's fine. But from 2015, I think the sustainability started to come in when it was on the top of the key indicators. It is about building for sustainability. So just think about that. How can we do it? Is it about upskilling teachers? Is it about rescheduling your budget to have somebody to do this permanent? Is it, as they've done at Sandal Castle, that they've appointed teaching assistants who are swimming instructors? You know, it's about being flexible to ensure you can sustain that for the future. And then try and show the connectivity between PE, school sport and physical activity. How has physical education impacted on the development of school sport and physical activity? How has your investment on emotional well-being made an impact across standards of attainment? You know, Jo Wilkinson in Derby has got a fantastic underground map at how, by investing in the level 5, 6 for her teachers, how SATs have gone up exponentially on a positive trajectory year on year. Fantastic contribution from PE to the rest of the curriculum. And then, if necessary, use the definitions poster. So you can say PE is the planned curriculum sequential development. Extracurricular is an extension of the curriculum. Physical activity is about physical movement. So you can use all of those things, and you can get the children to define them and maybe draw posters around them and articulate them in a way that's around the school. So visitors, parents, eventually when they're back in school, understand why you've invested in this way and why it's ring fenced. Okay, over to you, Eileen, if there's anything else you want to add, or the last
Just
slide.
about the importance of putting PE at the heart of the curriculum. We've mentioned Sandal Castle on many occasions, but PE is the driver in that school, and they are, in terms of academic achievement, the highest performing school in Wakefield.
Yep. Okay, Eileen, over to you.
Last slide then, yes.
And then questions.
Simon, we've got just time to address safe practice. Every single person who is working within the sector should have access to this publication. It's that definitive advice right across the profession. Very clear guidance. It was put together by 3 people who have got great expertise in the subject. 4 chapters. The first one deals about health and safety, the law and the responsibility, and I know we all worry about that. Then there's the next chapter is about principles for developing PESPA and the learning experience. And then there's a chapter about teaching and learning about safety. And then the final one is about case law and frequently asked questions. There is nothing that you would want to know that is not in this book. So I so much advocate that every single person involved in the sector has access to a copy, because let's face it, PE, school sport, physical activity, it's all about teaching about safety, but it's about teaching safely as well. So get your copy if you haven't already got it. I think they've sold very quickly, haven't they, this time? So I haven't got the figure. I hear that they've flown off the shelves.
Yeah, and it's about keeping safe, and that's important with confidence.
So important. Teach safely and teach about safety, and above all, stay safe.
Right, we've got a few questions here. There's a couple popped in the box, which are quite quick ones, and it said, can we use our funding for outdoor learning? If you can tie that into your 5 indicators, I think you're actually expanding the curriculum there and making broad. If it's driven by PE, then of course you can. There's a brilliant question here about, there's a lot of criticism that, time taken up traveling to and from swimming. Could we use the money to hire a room so we can carry on teaching there? That is a really interesting and innovative sort of option there. And I don't really know the answer to that. I think what it comes down to is sustainable. Could you, if the funding stopped this year, could you still sustain hiring that room? Is there anywhere nearer? Is there another school pool? If that's as far away as it is, then do we need to look at changing the school day? Does it swimming? Could it be first thing in the morning or last thing at night so parents could go there? I know that proposes problems for you if they've got siblings at the school, but is there any way you can look at a sustainable solution within the school curriculum timetable? Or do you need to move to a 3-day intensive program where they go swimming on these 3 days? So there's quite a few things there that we might need to ask offline. We did have some other questions, which one was, could they have extra information and guidance for a sports educator currently teaching in schools? We wasn't quite sure what sort of guidance you wanted on there. So if you just want to email and expand that, we can help. And then someone asked, how are people allocating funding when so many things like clubs and visitors are not allowed due to COVID? And we totally understand the challenges, but what we're seeing, and just talking to the active partnerships as they sort of look at data and look at how people filled it in in July, halfway through COVID, as we were locked down then, it is about being innovative, and it is about using it in curriculum time. PE is the entitlement, and it was about physical activity as well. How can they upskill staff, upskill children as young leaders to get people active at break times as well in their bubbles? So there are all sorts of issues there. I know it's hard, you can't get external people in, but would you do that if you didn't have the funding, or would you look to use the expertise you have in the school? We've actually looked at as well what are schools actually benefiting from the funding? Hopefully it's more than playground redesign. We hope it's more than redesign as well. We hope it's about placing PE at the heart of the curriculum to ensure people's physical, social, emotional, cognitive well-being are at the heart. So as they leave in year 6, they are as well prepared, best type of citizens as they go through. So hopefully as they leave at year 11, year 13, and as they go on, they are the best young people they can be, and they will be able to be employed in an uncertain world. So we hope schools are benefiting. Eileen and I had a discussion about this question earlier. Eileen, do you want to say, but you were saying, you know, if they haven't benefited, do you want to share your...
I really can't repeat what I said, really. But no, we've had unprecedented funding in PE school sport for 2 decades now, and really we should be reaping the benefits. And to be fair, in a good number of schools we are. There's some phenomenal practice going on out there. And so we've got the funding, and we've got to make sure, that the young people benefit from it, but it's a sustainable benefiting.
And I'd like to just finish with a question that I didn't even understand, and this is from Mr. Roger Davis.
Is Mr. Roger Davis listening? Because I hope he is, because here's my answer. The
question to Eileen was finger or thumb peg. Eileen, would you like to give your answer and explain to the rest of us who are not from Yorkshire what that actually means?
Well, it's nothing to do with Yorkshire, actually, but it's...
Oh, is it not? I do apologise.
Since Roger discovered that I do a bit of crown green bowling, he wanted to know whether I prefer the finger bit bias or the thumb bias. I did reply to him, I prefer thumb, but I'm flexible and adaptable like all Yorkshire women are. And that's the answer, Roger, if you're listening.
Okay, colleagues, if you have more questions, just please email them to CPD, which is Simon Roach, who set all this up for us, and we will answer them for you as much as possible. Thank you so much for listening. Please stay safe and stay well. And thank you again for tuning in.
Yeah, and please do use AFBI for our advice and support.